Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first NextGen breakout session for today. My name is Caitlin Baker. I'm the Senior Creative Manager here at GovLoop. And in this session, we're going to be talking about the role of communities in innovation. So hopefully you enjoyed our morning keynotes to start us off the day. I loved hearing from both of those speakers, and we have a ton of great content still in line for you throughout the day. So let's get into this session. No one innovates alone, or at least they shouldn't. But how do you get buy-in for your new idea? You need to create a team and a true community of innovators. Today, we have two government innovators to talk to us today about the roles, responsibilities, and processes that they put in place to create their innovation teams and turn their ideas into actions. So before we get started, we do have some housekeeping stuff to get into. All right, so if you're on Twitter, we'd love to hear about what you're learning today. Love for you to keep up with us. So use the hashtag NextGenGov to share any takeaways and any things you're enjoying about the summit. We also have a ton of additional resources available for you to download. Those are going to be on the right-hand side of your console, and that includes the slide deck from the session. So you can download that, refer back to it later if you need to. If you want to access the closed captioning feature, you can look for the icon at the bottom of the media player. And then you should also see a Q&A panel on your screen. This is the spot. If you have any technical problems, feel free to send questions through there. And then as our presenters are speaking today, if you have any questions for them, please send in questions. We'll have some time at the end of the session to go through all of those. So put those in the chat and we will get to them a little bit later in the session. We also have the open chat available, the group chat. That's going to be a button at the very bottom of the screen on the panel. So I think it's on the far right. So if you click that, it'll bring up the chat with everyone else talking in there. We want to hear everything you have to say. And then if you do miss anything, this will all be on demand afterwards. You'll get a link in your email with access to this session, as well as the keynotes and every other session that's going on today. We also are offering CPEs for our session today. You can get 1 credit. You have to do these 3 things: attend this session for the entire duration, take the 3 polls, they'll be in the second half of the session, and then also complete the evaluation. The form can be found in the resource module, and then also within the Resource Center in the main environment. Those CPEs will be mailed directly to you a little bit later after the session, after we confirm everyone met all the requirements. So with that, I will introduce our speakers for today. Presenting first, we have Barbara C. Morton. Barbara is the Deputy Chief Veterans Experience Officer at the Veterans Experience Office, or VEO, at the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. In this role, Barbara co-leads VEO, the Secretary's customer experience insight engine, supporting and enabling the department in providing the highest quality experiences in the delivery of care, benefits, and memorial services to service members, veterans, their families, caregivers, and survivors. Barbara is responsible for building a lasting CX capability at VA and sharing best practices across sister federal agencies, including the Customer Experience Cookbook, which serves as a CX practitioner's guide to stand up and mature customer experience capabilities in government. And then after Barbara's presentation, we will hear from Blair Corcoran de Castillo. Blair is the director of STAR's Innovation Studio. She joins Opportunity at Work with a background in and a passion for community building and co-design. Her career has been focused on using participatory methods and human-centered design to drive collective action, most often in areas related to family economic opportunity and mobility. She has well over a decade of experience using these approaches to inform strategy, research, policy, program, and learning design for public sector and mission-oriented organizations. So with that, we're going to jump into our presentations. We will have some time again at the end for Q&A. So if you have any questions as Blair and Barbara are presenting, please feel free to throw those in the box and we will get to them at the end. And with that, Barbara, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here today. I'm sorry I'm not on video. I was only able to join through audio, but thrilled to be here nonetheless, and really excited to be co-presenting with Blair. You will see some common themes, I think, around innovation and human-centered design and different manners of thinking and doing in our spaces. So really excited to share with you a little bit more about how VA is institutionalizing those practices and sort of the spirit of innovation as well. So I'll start with a quick journey line, of course, just to give some context. And when I was thinking about what I would want to share with you all today, I actually looked up the definition of innovation, and what it says in Merriam-Webster's dictionary is essentially a new idea, a new way of thinking. And so this journey line represents how VA has transformed its way of thinking around the customer experience, the veterans experience, really starting back in 2014 with a pretty significant catalyst. At that time, some of you may recall that there was a crisis at the Phoenix VA Medical Center. It was around wait times and veterans not being able to get access to the care and services they needed in a timely manner. And that was really a moment in time for us to kind of rethink how we delivered services and think differently, again, getting back to this innovative way of doing and thinking. And so the Veterans Experience Office was stood up as a result of that particular catalyst in 2015. And one of the most significant things that you can see on our timeline here is the first ever Veterans Experience Journey Map. And that was created based on human-centered design practice, which you'll hear a lot about again during this conversation today, by talking to veterans and their families across the country from all different ages, locations, gender, backgrounds, and really just changing our thinking about how we deliver services. So we didn't want to continue to feel like we were shifting the burden to the veteran to figure out our organizational structure, but instead wanted us as an organization to take on the challenge of understanding their journey and how VA fits into their lives during their particular life cycle. It was a conversation changer, and again, it really tweaked our orientation as an organization in terms of thinking how we might best serve our customers. So one of the other things we did, again, thinking differently back in 2016, we knew that we had broken a trust with veterans and their families as a result of Phoenix. And so one of the things we wanted to do as an organization was really measure at baseline, how do veterans feel about us? What is their sentiment of trust around VA? And that was a really courageous question, I think, to ask at the time. It was a very simple question: do you trust VA to fulfill this country's commitment to veterans? And of those veterans that we asked, that we had surveyed at that time, on a Likert scale, 1 to 5, only 55% at that time either agreed or strongly agreed with that question. So that was really a great opportunity for us to see where we were and understand, again, different way of thinking. We needed to do something to rebuild that trust and kind of have veterans feel much more comfortable coming back to VA. 2017, we knew we kind of needed to build the customer experience capability and this different way of thinking into the fabric of our actual services. So bringing it from a concept idea and really translating it into an actual program. And so we started with our siblings in the Veterans Health Administration and looked at the patient experience journey. Again, different way of thinking about, well, what is that the moment that matters most to a veteran when they walk into a VA medical facility? What are their pain points from their point of view? What are the bright spots? And you can see here we applied human-centered design and created another first ever patient experience journey map, which we used to inform a brand new patient experience program at the department. 2018 and 2019 were really banner years for us as well on this journey. And I would also say, as a kind of a key takeaway with innovation and communities, it doesn't happen with one person or one office. This is a massive at-scale global effort of folks, communities banding together to sort of think differently and do differently and execute on these ideas. So 2018 and 2019, one of the things that we wanted to do was to continue to sort of hardwire customer experience as a core part of our business discipline at VA. And so we leveraged some of the drivers in government. You see a citation to the CFR, the president's management agenda as well, and also there was a secretary directive back then. These types of authorities in and of themselves won't sort of create the innovation or create the change, but they are authorities that help us point back to and elevate how we might continue to hardwire customer experience in our business and how we do business. 2020 was another wonderful kind of maturity year for us, where we started turning to look at the employee experience as well. So not only did we want to apply human-centered design practices to the veteran-facing services, we also wanted to start looking at ourselves internally and the employee experience. So we used the same human-centered design practice, mapped the employee journey, and really were able to start to identify moments that matter, pain points, bright spots in a very similar fashion with our employees. 2021, as you can see, we're continuing to really grow and mature this capability. I hope all of you are familiar with Executive Order on Customer Experience that the President signed last December. Again, different way of thinking and doing, and really wonderfully putting customer experience at the center of federal government and each agency, including VA, which is wonderful. You fast forward to where we are in 2022 on this journey line with the thousands of efforts by thousands of people who are thinking differently and making space for experience as a co-equal measure of our agency performance. You now see trust, veteran trust, asking the same exact question, be at a 76% either agree or strongly agree, which is over a 20% increase from where we started back in 2016. So this just gives you, a quick overview of this journey. Again, it is years long. It takes the coalition of the willing, an incredible community, and a willingness to think and do differently in government. So I'll flip to the next slide. This is another sort of visual, and when I try to describe to people sort of what we're trying to do here at VA in the customer experience realm, it's really shifting our perspective from what you see on the left-hand side, which is typically an organization from its own organizational perspective, right? You have a secretary, you have a deputy secretary, you have administration. What we try to do in this office and throughout the organization is really shift our mindset, again, tying back to that journey map, to the image on the right-hand side, which is VA from the veteran's perspective, putting ourselves in their shoes and helping them truly, truly understand how VA can fit into their lives rather than them having to navigate our bureaucratic structure. This next slide is just a quick framework to showcase what, at a high level, the process of human-centered design is. And again, this was a very new concept for us at VA back in 2015, 2016. I will tell you that there were some folks who kind of were like, what is that thing? Isn't that just for industry? How does this fit in government? But because of our incredible community of innovators and people who are willing and open to thinking differently and embracing this process, we were able to really kind of deploy it and continue to roll it out at scale across patient experience and other services we provide. So human-centered design, of course, starts with discovery, right, where you really just ask the questions of your customers. And for us, we also draw on industry best practices, nonprofits. We don't want to sort of stop at just our own customers, but we want to learn and discover how other organizations are able to deliver exceptional experiences, adapt them, and bring them into the department and government. And the second phase, of course, is co-design and implementation, iterating, failing fast, rapidly prototyping, and really just understanding how to tweak and modify any solution you may have, whether it's a training, whether it's a communication artifact, any other product based on the feedback from your customers. And finally, really, this is all in service to two things. One is you want to make sure that you provide a great experience for every individual, and that's the service recovery part. If a veteran is having a difficult time, we want to be able to earn that trust back. But the second component of it is really making sure that we can keep an eye on overarching system-wide performance improvement. So are those difficulties or pain points at scale that we need to address across an organization, or are they particular in a certain area or location? This next slide, we always like to kind of provide high-tech and low-tech use case examples of how we have applied this innovation, this different way of thinking in terms of human-centered design. So I mentioned we started our journey with our siblings, our wonderful community in the Veterans Health Administration, who were totally on board with building VA's first ever patient experience program. So in this journey map, one of the things that we love to highlight is we discovered there was a significant moment that mattered most to veterans and a pain point, which was navigation of a VA medical center. Now, for me, the power of research like human-centered design is that it reveals these particular important moments that otherwise wouldn't necessarily be obvious on a typical operational dashboard. Again, different way of thinking. Okay, let's talk about veterans' experience and see what that reveals to us in terms of opportunities for change. What we did is we partnered with our siblings in VHA, and we were able to help them scale a program that some VHA medical centers have in place, which is very low tech, an ambassador greeter program. We help them brand and scale it across the system. So you see what we call red coat ambassadors, red coat navigators in medical centers now for the sole purpose of relieving that burden on veterans who felt confused about navigating these giant buildings. What you can see in the bottom box here under Respond and Improve is a before and after snapshot improvement, ease of navigation when we survey veterans about their experience increased by 4%. Proof positive that when you use innovative thinking, human-centered design, you can always improve the experience and make an impact on veterans' lives. This next slide is the high-tech example that we like to utilize. And so this is really the experience on va.gov. So on the left-hand side of the screen, what you'll see is the va.gov website pre-2018. And for those of you who, like websites or like to surf websites, you can see this one has a picture of the White House, has the announcement about the president's budget, things that are very kind of corporate looking and corporate driven, right? This is not something that veterans are probably interested in. So in 2018, we had received a lot of signals from veterans that they said, you know what, we're not really sure where to go if we want to transact with the department. There are lots of different websites, and frankly, the website as it appeared on va.gov at the time didn't look very user-friendly. So what we did is we applied this different way of thinking and doing in human-centered design and partnered with our Chief Technology Officer's office to really reimagine what va.gov should look and feel like. Not only were we able to sort of migrate all the different web properties under the banner of va.gov to create a single digital front door for veterans, but we also co-designed and redesigned the website with them. So what you see today is on the right-hand side, top transactions up front, personal login, ability to update your name and address, et cetera, things that we expect in the real world that we weren't providing in government. And what you can see here, again, under Respond and Improve, the results are an over 20% increase in satisfaction with use of va.gov before and after launch. So wonderful examples of, again, these communities of thinking, banding together with these different ways of thinking and doing to create better results for veterans. This final slide here, and then I'll hand it over to Blair, is really kind of the so what, in my view, of sort of innovation and particularly customer experience and human-centered design thinking. What you see here is an increase of our key measures of experience, the North Star being trust, and then the other three components being ease, effectiveness, and emotion. Was the interaction easy? Was it effective? Did you get what you needed? And did you feel like a valued customer? This is just an incredible story for us to share about the VA journey to be able to think differently, band together, and create a positive impact for those we serve. So excited for questions later, and for now, I will turn it back to Blair. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Barbara. It's always amazing to hear you speak. You set the bar high. And I just really love to continue to hear the story of just the work and leadership of VEO in this space. Just continue to lead the way in how to apply human-centered design and customer experience and employee experience in government. So I've been away from government for about 3 years. So I'm a former Fed. And so I feel like there's been so much in those 3 years that's happened. And so much kudos to you all. Well, morning. My name is Blair. Like I said, I'm a former Fed, just out about 3-4 years. And I've largely spent my career working at the intersection of design strategy and economic mobility. I'm currently a director of a design studio at a nonprofit based here in DC called Opportunity at Work. And our mission is to rewire the labor market so that talented workers who are skilled through alternative routes other than a bachelor's degree, who we call stars, can get the lives and careers that they deserve. I'm just really excited to be here to talk about the role of communities in innovation, because NextGen was actually one of the first innovation communities that I was exposed to and became a part of when I joined the government over a decade ago. So it's got a special spot in my heart. And it was also at a session at NextGen many moons ago that I was first introduced to the book Where Good Ideas Come From by Stephen Johnson. This is a bit of an aside, but if you haven't read it yet, Johnson's this book, I really recommend it. It's super interesting and pretty enjoyable. And you get to learn about the history of innovation, and it shares insights into the origins of many of the ideas and innovations that we come to trust and use today. And in that book, Johnson makes the case that good ideas come from openness and connectivity. And it struck me as I was thinking about this presentation that those are really two ingredients that make communities powerful drivers of innovation as well. And I think that openness and connectivity is super related to and aligned with what Barbara talked about at the VEO, with different ways of thinking and doing. And if you've ever read the book, you'll remember his references to reefs, cities, and webs, all with different levels of openness and connectivity. And I would argue all with different ways and levels of doing things differently, which is what really breeds innovation. So you'll hear me reference Johnson's book throughout, since it's a bit of an ode to my first engagement with this community, but let's get into it. So here's my take on the role of communities in innovation. Communities drive innovation. And Barbara's presentation absolutely spoke to that. I know that in the news media and in history books, the image of a lone innovator is what's sold and told, but what the science and research behind creativity and innovation shows is that nothing's truly done alone. No idea, no product, really nothing. And communities really drive innovation through openness to new perspectives and learnings, and by connecting those perspectives and ideas to each other. And this is amazing because the government has so many different disciplines, expertise, people with different backgrounds and experiences to draw from. And so intermingling all these ideas and knowledge together is really what creates something newer and evolved from what we've experienced before. And really, all of this intermingling is really only done in communities or with other people. And so what I love about Barbara and I both talking today is that Barbara leads an organization that's kind of leading the way in how to drive innovation kind of at scale in the government. And my perspective from my role in government is when you're kind of an innovator in a smaller organization who isn't necessarily all about driving innovation, what do you do? How do you do it? How do you start to drive a community of innovators in your organization? So that's the perspective I'm bringing today. And so when I thought back to my own experiences in government and the roles that communities have played for me in helping to drive innovations forward, here were the three main rules that came up. And these are probably definitely not the only three. So the first was just peer-to-peer learning. Being new to government and trying to understand what experimentation in government meant, it was really important for me to have a place to learn, grow, and kind of troubleshoot shared challenges. It gave me the courage really to try new things and feel like I wasn't alone when I had a community of peers. It also exposed me to a lot of different experiences and perspectives. So it helped to challenge what I know and believe by hearing about others' lived experiences and beliefs. And I love that the VEO goes out and looks at industry, government, and nonprofits to kind of understand from all those perspectives. Similarly, I was kind of first coming to government, just drinking from a fire hose. And then finally, I think one of the most exciting ways that communities can drive innovation is through, collective intelligence, like driving and building shared challenges together. So really allowing the community to innovate. And it really taught me a lot of lessons about when the government should be more of a catalyst and supporter versus a creator of innovations. And so you could probably argue that 1 and 2 are together and these aren't mutually exclusive. But I definitely could think back to discrete times of when roles of communities have played these roles for me. And so I'm going to share some of those examples. But before I do that, I did want to share what a robust and healthy and diverse innovation community that already exists in government. So I know that folks outside of the government might think that there's nothing innovative and creative happening, but government innovation communities and programs have been responsible for so many of the innovations that have become ubiquitous in life today, from GPS to the chips in your cell phone and on and on. So I just want to give you a glimpse, if you were new like I was a decade ago to government, about how varied and large the innovation ecosystem is in the government, because I had no idea. And so these 3 visuals actually come from a government innovation lab forum that I helped to host when I worked at the lab at the Office of Personnel Management. And as part of that session, we actually tried to start to map the innovation ecosystem and in what different parts of the government we're trying to do what and innovate with whom, so that we could start to connect the dots and figure out how to work together. So just a sense that there are lots of other folks who are out there to learn from and with. But into some examples. So when I joined the government, I joined a small grant program that was born out of the Affordable Care Act, and whose mission was basically to build pathways to economic stability for those in poverty through careers in healthcare. In my program office, there were other grants programs, along with a block grant program. And so each of these grants had different focuses on different groups and toward different outcomes, one on healthy marriage and responsible fatherhood, another on tribal TANF child welfare. But there were absolutely a lot of overlaps in the communities that we were serving and the experiences and challenges that they were facing. But honestly, our teams didn't work that closely together. And only because a number of us came in through a development program, we knew each other. We started to talk to each other about our programs and grantee and participant needs. And that's when we realized that an approach to technical assistance, that we needed kind of a new approach to technical assistance. We weren't really helping our grantees to solve really deeply complex problems. And we wanted to test a new methodology that would enable our grantees, who we believed were most knowledgeable about the issues and needs of their communities, to drive the development of the solutions. So we got together, along with 3 grantees, 1 from each grant program. And we tested human-centered design as an alternative to traditional technical assistance. And as you can imagine, the prototypes that came out were contextualized by the grant program and the communities. But what we found was that this was a really valuable peer-to-peer learning experience for us in the program office to learn from one another, to be vulnerable, to share our challenges, but for grantees as well. They were able to finally have a safe space to be vulnerable and to share challenges and troubleshoot with the government, as opposed to feeling a little bit nervous about doing that. And the other things we realized, and I realized pretty quickly, is that finding a community could just be around the corner or the cubicle over. So if you want to start and build a community, start in your office. Giving ourselves a little bit of time and space to meet with our colleagues, learn about their programs, and build a trusted community, we found was actually vital to advancing our office's mission. It was also enjoyable. And we found the same for our grantees. They hungered for this community as well. And it really wasn't a large lift. We could share emails and phone numbers at their discretion, of course, and we could also host things, but they largely did a lot of this work on their own. And so that's just one way that I had a peer-to-peer learning experience that helped to drive some new ways of doing and thinking in the government. And so in the spirit of kind of this mind share, I'd love for you to throw in the chat what communities you're a part of and that you think might be valuable for other innovators to be a part of. I've shared GSA's amazing resources. They've got their communities of practice, like the new innovation adoption, which I guess probably isn't that new anymore. It came out last summer. And they've got the centers of excellence. But if you've got anything else that you want to share, please add it in the chat so that we can start to build community here. And as you do, I will want to move on to the next so we have some more time to chat. So that last bucket in terms of roles of communities that we talked about was about the collective intelligence of the community kind of driving solutions. I think this is one of the most exciting, at least for me, as I've continued to do my work. And so at the beginning of the presentation, I shared my organization is all about supporting talented workers who are skilled through alternative routes. And through a series of design projects last year, we realized that there was kind of this overwhelming theme of interest in and need for different types of communities for STARs across their learning and earning journeys. And so we decided at the beginning of this year that we wanted to work with STARs to build this community. And so the challenge statement that we used to kind of kick that project off was, how might we understand what a STAR community could and should be in a STAR-led way? And then we just recently ran a 2-week fellowship, which was in the form of a design-a-thon, think hackathon, where STARs went through the human-centered design process themselves to build out kind of the foundation of this community. And what we started to experiment with through this was actually community-centered design. So it's very much like human-centered design, but it shifts the balance of power from designers to the community. So the solutions are being built for, with, and by the community. And this is just another great example of the way that communities can drive innovation, by enabling communities themselves to solve challenges that they're best suited for and know the most about. And so wanted to share, so that's in my current, but also was able to do this a bit in my role in the government. So back in that same program office, we tried this. We had heard from a bunch of grantees about challenges in collaboration between instructors and grantee staff, and of the challenges of students remaining in the classroom while navigating all of the aspects of their life. We were seeing a lot of high rates of participants dropping out of our programming. And we realized that since students spent the majority of their time with their instructors, we had this hunch that instructors would be really key to helping us create potential solutions that supported students, because they probably knew them best. So we convened instructors from all of our grantee sites. We hosted a 2-day workshop, and they actually designed different interventions. Together came up with one that they wanted to pilot and test. And then we had a number of grantee organizations actually sign up to test it. And with that, we found the model that they designed was effective in supporting more students to complete their training programs. And really what we witnessed and learned from this was just, the powerful knowledge that a group of individuals who are not always at the table have, and that we can utilize to drive decision-making and proposing solutions. So I know that it can sometimes be hard to figure out ways to engage communities within the confines of our roles in government. But what we found is that we could be creative in the ways in which we could use pre-existing touch points. So like we had roundtables or we had community convenings, and we could actually just redesign those to engage folks in different ways. And this was one of the ways we did that. So we also found how much more engaged, empowered, and excited our grantees and the instructors were in driving the solutions with their team, with the support of the government, as opposed to us kind of forcing some of these. So that's just another example of how you can start to push different thinking and doing in government, and allowing for more openness and connectivity. And so similarly, continuing that mind meld, just really interested in what other examples of community-led innovation are you aware of and could be used for inspiration in the government for your colleagues. Here I've put challenge.gov, which is an amazing resource. They also have a community, and then I put OpenIDEO, their design consultancy that basically uses design practices in a very similar open government challenge.gov, open innovation way. But I'm sure that there are many others. So love to hear from you all what you think would be most useful. Oh, wow. And I'm just realizing where these are. There are definitely lots of innovation groups out there. Okay. And I think before we turn it back over, if you're looking for a new innovation group or community to be a part of, my organization today is building a community and a movement around skills-based hiring. So we'd love to learn from and with you about how we can build a better future of work that works for all of us. So if you're on LinkedIn after these sessions this afternoon, you'll see some of our campaign and calls for community. So looking forward to learning from and with you all through the rest of this panel. Thanks so much for having me. I'll turn it back over.
Thank you so much, Blair, and thank you, Barbara. We do have a lot of time left over for questions here. So if anyone does have any questions, please throw them in the Q&A box and we can get to those. But we also have a few polls to get through. So first up, we're wondering if you struggle with getting buy-in for ideas at your organization. Pretty simple yes or no question. While this poll is up, I do have one question for you, Blair or Barbara. What do you see as the biggest barriers to innovation in agencies right now? I know that's kind of a big question, but.
So I can jump in just from my perspective, and I would love Blair's thoughts, obviously having been in government and now kind of outside of government. So I think a lot of times it's honestly sort of a natural human emotion of fear, right? It's a scary thing to kind of step outside of your comfort zone. It's a scary sort of prospect to think and do differently. But this is why I think, community, going back to this theme, is so important, because, none of us ever do any of these kind of elements of progress and work alone. We band together and we kind of make it so. And so I think having communities of practice, I know in VA we have, an innovators network that's sort of formalized throughout the organization, particularly in the healthcare space, but there are also different innovation groups across other parts of the organization as well. And I think sort of forming these communities gives us, collective us, permission to think and do differently. And so I think the infrastructure is really, really important. But it is something that, people might need to sort of tiptoe into at first. But what you see, though, over time is that in government, as with any organization, there's so much opportunity to be creative and be imaginative and think about how might we find our way through this solution to sort of deploy or to kind of implement at scale. And that is all doable. It's all possible. I think we just collectively and culturally need to be comfortable with the discomfort at first, and then again, use our wonderful community partnerships to band together to showcase the art of what is possible.
That's an amazing point. I think Barbara said it really well. But what I love is of what Barbara said was just like how we do it together. And I think what I think is one of the greatest challenges is just like the power of inertia, especially when you're doing something alone or you feel like you're alone. It's really hard to move a mountain, move a rock by yourself, right? And like Barbara said, when we band together. And so I think it's figuring out who are your advocates, champions, and supporters, and figuring out the small ways. Like Barbara said, I think You can be most creative when you have a lot of constraints, and the government's given us a lot of constraints. So it should be the most creative place in the world, right? But I also think that agencies do have a lot of autonomy, and that they can utilize to test new and different ways of doing. So I think it's just being able to get folks together. So if there is this movement, this community that's kind of driving for this change together, to kind of combat that inertia that I think can be so hard in government because of all the regs and just that's the way we've always done it, and just the nature of how federal institutions are supposed to withstand the changes in a time. So I love that this could actually be the antidote to that.
Awesome, thank you. So we have our poll results in. About 60% of people said that it is an uphill battle to get buy-in for their ideas at their organization, with 40% saying that it's super easy to get support. We do have another poll question coming up about the biggest barrier to innovation. And I had a question kind of following up on what you're talking about, a lot of this building community, getting people together, getting people in the same room. That seems more difficult now with the hybrid workforce. I mean, in our poll and at the keynote session, the majority of people are either remote or hybrid. What is something as supervisors or managers we can do or can keep in mind for the hybrid workforce to promote innovation and to build these communities? Do you have any tips for that?
So I can also chime in here. I'm sorry, guys. I'm used to being able to see wonderful faces on video. I apologize. So I think from my perspective, I mean, the hybrid environment is there's so much opportunity in it, but there are many challenges as well. But this is where I think our kind of innovators in the technology space have really done us all a tremendous favor. So I think about technology like Mural, right? So I love the sticky notes. I love in-person design sessions. I love all that, but we've had to collectively adapt to having this kind of hybrid environment. Even, sometimes with interviews with veterans, we need to have them virtually. So I do think technology has been an incredible enabler for us. I don't know that it's a one-for-one substitute with what we're used to in terms of in-person, but I do think that as we mature through this hybrid work environment, we all sort of adapt to it and really kind of embrace the opportunity we have with technology, I think we're going to be able to continue to sort of grow innovative ideas in brand new directions and new ways that we never would have even imagined. And I think catalysts, whether they're pandemics or otherwise, really are accelerators for innovation and change in thinking and doing, because it forces you to. It forces you out of your typical status quo, the inertia that Blair was talking about, to really get out of a comfort zone by force and having to adapt and embrace something different and new. So I think the opportunity also for us too, thinking about where we each sit in our own particular organization. I'm a true believer that innovation can happen anywhere. It can happen on a micro scale, in a particular organization, or it can happen across an organization at scale, across an agency. And this is also where I think a technology platform, a crowdsourcing platform, can be really, really useful to, connecting those community ideas together at scale across a hybrid environment that spans, geographically in different spaces as well. Back over, I'd love to hear Blair's thoughts too.
Yeah, no, that totally resonates with me. I think one of the opportunities is the fact that people are still in their communities. They're not spending their time commuting always to the office, which I think provides us with a closeness to the community and to understanding what other citizens are thinking about our work in different ways. And I'm not sure how many of us are actually able to leave. I feel like I've had more meetings than less now that we're remote, but I do think that is keeping us a little bit more grounded in like the more contextual reality, which I think is an absolutely amazing opportunity for the government, and helps combat one of the criticisms that like government civil servants are so disconnected. We're not. We're also citizens, and we're sitting in our communities a lot of the time. I think the one challenge though, and I think that Barbara shared some of the ways to combat that, is just being able to share and connect those ideas, where a lot of that happens with trust and being able to be vulnerable. A lot of those connections happen in person. And so how do we create meetings and sessions that are virtual, but that have the same level of trust, vulnerability, I think that this just takes a little bit more time probably in a virtual environment. And it also means that we do need to utilize and could utilize some more of these innovation, these tools that Barbara mentioned, like Mural and other platforms. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities for us being, for government workers being hybrid, and just being a little bit more intentional about when people are together, how do you use that time?
Definitely. Yeah, I really like your point about vulnerability. I feel like that gets to a lot of it. Like there's an element, especially when working remotely, you are disconnected physically, you're not in the office. It's harder to like gauge emotions, to gauge feelings and stuff. And so it's harder to think of people like your coworkers and see them as like the full person that they are, since you're only getting such a small slice of them, especially if you're like not even on video, not even chatting face to face on a daily basis. So I know that's something we like talk a lot about at GovLoop, is trying to like even just like including icebreakers all the time to like, they can get annoying, but just things to humanize people, to get to know each other better, to build relationships outside of just, you know, asking for something. Hey, can you do this for me? So that when you do get together for these broader, innovative brainstorming conversations, you feel like a sense of trust and like understanding of each other. So I really appreciate that. So we have our poll results for our biggest barriers. It looks like the number one is it being extremely hard to change the status quo, with almost 50% of people answering that, followed by not enough time for creative problem solving. Blair or Barbara, is there anything you'd like to say to follow up on this poll question?
Yeah, actually, I would love to. This is fascinating, and it actually doesn't surprise me. But it's extremely hard to change the status quo. So this is where, again, circling back to this theme, which is a great one, of innovation and communities. So this is a key strategy and a challenge for us in the Veterans Experience Office in the early days. So, you know, as we talked about earlier, Catalyst with Phoenix, new office created in 2015. I came on in July 2016. And I kind of immediately detected, you know, there was a lot of energy around the newness, right, of this concept of veteran experience, but there was also kind of a lot of hesitancy too. I mean, people were excited about the conversation, but didn't really know what it meant to sort of operationalize it. And so this was kind of something we sensed, we detected, and we thought, okay, we've got to be able to prove the concept of the value of this practice called human-centered design and translate it into the four corners of government to make it sort of impactful in a tangible way. And so, again, partnering with our siblings, like-minded thinkers, innovators in the Veterans Health Administration was a key component for us to sort of prove the concept and break that sort of inertia that Blair talked about in the status quo. Because when people don't understand something fully right away, it's sort of an easy thing to sort of dismiss or think of it as like a fad or, you know, a one-off, right? And so it is extremely hard to change the status quo. And this is where I think your coalition of the willing and the community partnerships you have to sort of build your use case and your business case for change is so powerful. And I believe that was really what enabled us to ultimately grow this capability to scale across all aspects of the department. Over.
Thanks, Barbara. Yeah, I think this is super fascinating. And I think I just challenge people on the status quo. I think one of the things that I found most effective was using the status quo, the moments within the status quo, like the traditional confines of our grant program as dictated by Congress, in different ways, and starting there and trying to show how you could do the same type of work in different ways and what impact. I think Barbara spoke to this the same way. It's like, how do you get some small wins? How do you show impact in this different way of doing it, even if you're not wholly throwing out the old way immediately? That gets people more comfortable. And I think it's just thinking about the confines of your job in different ways and like how you can use those touch points, how you can use your different roles, your different convenings, and trying to start there. And I think it will snowball, like Barbara was saying, as you get more and more folks bought in and excited.
Thank you. All right, so we have our last question for our polls, and this is kind of about that comfort. How comfortable are you voicing a new idea? Are you happy to bring new ideas to the table? Do you have to kind of share them with your close friends first to get a gauge before you take them, or are you just not really interested in that? And we kind of already touched on this a little bit, but I think one thing And this was mentioned a little bit of in the chat with, psychological safety, feeling comfort and all of that. With going against the status quo and with innovating new ideas, there's this huge element of risk, right? Like this could go wrong, things could work out, people are going to say no, and whatever. How do you as a leader get your teams comfortable with taking on risks while you're innovating, with like the potential of failure?
I can jump in again on this one. So I think it goes back to sort of what Blair was talking about in terms of safety, psychological safety and vulnerability, really kind of sharing that, yes, you have permission to fail and fail fast. And frankly, the human-centered design practice is built on fast failure, right? And so I think giving us collectively that permission and not just sort of lip service, but actually encouraging all of us to sort of be creative, use the practice that we've established in human-centered design, and understanding that quote unquote failure or an idea that doesn't work is actually part of the process to get us to the best solution at the end of the day. And I think for those who've ever participated in human-centered design or are designers or design strategists, that's like part and parcel of the language and the dialogue that they're very used to. And so I think they're key communicators in making it feel comfortable and safe for folks we're bringing in. And I love the concept of like community design, right? We're bringing folks in to help kind of brainstorm and prototype, products that are non-designers and really giving them permission to let the creative juices flow. It's almost like, don't worry about coloring in the lines, don't worry about drawing a straight line. Just try to let yourself be creative. And I think over time, as we become adults, we sort of lose that comfort level of coloring outside of the lines. And I do believe that the design community and innovation really allows us to do that. And I'll share one quick story too. So one of the exciting things that we are working on with our brothers and sisters across agencies is improving the transition experience from military to civilian, because we know from veterans and service members, it's a really, really difficult transition for them. And so as part of the President's management agenda and the Customer Experience Executive Order, which outlines a commitment to looking at life experiences across agencies based on the perspective of those that we serve, one of those life experiences is this transition experience. And so last week we hosted a design workshop with our brothers and sisters from Department of Defense, Department of Labor, HUD, Department of Education, OMB, GSA, some folks who've never had exposure to human-centered design, to really embrace the process and use their expertise, use this community to narrow down some potential prototypes and solutions to sort of crack the nut on transition. So just another example of, having a methodology led by people who give us all sort of the safe space and permission to be creative, think differently, and band together again as sort of a strong force to advocate for these types of transformations. Over.
Yeah, and somebody put in the chat something that really spoke to me as well, that, innovation is also about building on existing knowledge. I think it's also on scaling things that work. I think sometimes everybody thinks that innovation can only be new, but often there are a lot of things that are working great in government, and it's about scaling them, learning from them, and building upon them. And so I think that's another way to breed change, is to just shine a light on what is working and why, and how that can be applied to other parts of our work in government, because there is just so much amazing work that's already happening. And so it's just learning from one another and building upon that. So I love that somebody wrote that in the chat as well.
Awesome. Thank you. So the results show that most people are actually very happy to bring new ideas to the table, or just need a little bit of talking it out first. I think this is great news. I have a question, this is really more just personally. So I'm the creative manager at GovLoop. I manage a team of creative people, not designers in the product building way, but visual designers, but even still creative thinking, creative problem solving, everyone does. That's a part of all of our lives. Do you have any tips for how to practice creative thinking or problem solving? Because it is kind of a skill. Anything that you do or that you encourage your teams to do in particular?
So I always kind of question my own assumptions. I never assume that my first reaction is either, the right thought or the only way forward. So I think always being my own and our own check and balance with questioning assumptions, I think is really important. And always asking, well, why couldn't we? It's a simple question, but it's like, why couldn't we do this? Or, why wouldn't we want to do that? And just, it's an open-mindedness that I think we need to all give ourselves permission for, to really push ourselves to think and do a little bit differently. But for me, it really starts with asking myself and my team asking me, and vice versa, asking each other, why wouldn't we be able to do something in a certain way?
I love those. I'd also add, especially since the pandemic, getting some space from work helps people. It helps me, I'd say, personally stay creative. I think sometimes when I'm in the same place, thinking about the same things, it's easy to just get into kind of like autopilot. Mm-hmm. And I start just doing the same things over and over again. And so me and my team, we think about making sure that we're taking breaks, even if they're 10 to 15 minutes, and then even getting outside and observing anything, observing the weather, nature, or like related to our work, watching how workers are working and engaging with their environment and their works. And so it's like, how can you continue to learn from similar, maybe analogous situations? That's another way. And so space, I think, is a really, really healthy one. And then I think we're constantly trying to find, because I think we've gotten, at least on my team, a little bit out of sync of this, because many of us are many of us are virtual now. Getting back out and engaging with other people outside of our organization. I feel like that was a lot more prevalent when everybody was required to be in the office. For those of us who have the privilege of not having to always be, I do think it is, at least for myself, more of a challenge to get back out to meetups or to go to convenings where I can meet other people, hear how they're thinking about things, and really start to see things in new and different ways. I know that personally, I've just been more challenged in finding that space. And me and my team are trying to be a little bit more like prioritizing that in our day to day as well.
Absolutely. I think it's really good as a leader to encourage that, like, hey, take some space from work. Like, you'll be a better person here if you're a better person outside of it, if you're taking time to live your life and, experience the world. So that's really great to hear. We have one more question in the box. What are your thoughts about creating dedicated innovation funds, similar to a grant with an RFP, to stimulate innovation within organizations? So a little bit more on the technical side, but any thoughts, ideas? Barbara?
Yeah, so I'm a full supporter of that. I think it should be one of a multi-pronged strategic approach. Like, I don't think we can sort of hope for innovation fund grants as an exclusive way, an exclusive channel to sort of bring us to the next levels of innovation, because I think it needs to be infused throughout the entire organization and not delimited to a certain fund. However, I do think having some sort of distinct innovation grant or funding program, it elevates innovation. And again, it gives us, collective us, that permission to think and do differently. So I think it's an incredible driver and something to really recognize and incentivize and hold up as a success for others to sort of look at and say, oh, you know what, that's been recognized, there's funding attached to it. I want to think and try something differently as well. And I can tell you that in VA, and particularly I mentioned the Innovators Network as part of the department's healthcare system. They have a very robust awards and sort of incentives program. They have a Shark Tank competition every year. It's become a massive sort of cultural celebration, if you will. And it really allows employees who are really the best experts to know what needs to be changed and to do things better and differently. It allows us to elevate them and to have ideas adopted, in one organization in the department and then at scale. So I think the infrastructure, the funding, those are key components as part of a multi-pronged approach to make sure that we stay innovative and on the cutting edge.
Yeah, I totally agree. Back when I was at HHS, there used to be the Idea Lab, and they also had a similar accelerator program that folks could go through that ended with, pitch competition. And I think what was really effective about that was not about permission to innovate, but more about cover to innovate. So being a part of this program allowed managers, supervisors, and their teams to feel like this doesn't have to go well. And I think that's a hard thing when you're in the government, when you're mission focused and like what you do, it's public dollars, right? Like there are all these things that we think about and feel each day when we make decisions about what we're doing. And I mean, civil servants are so committed to their organization's mission. So I think that sometimes that cover is helpful through these types of programs. And I know that like other countries, like Denmark has a Department of Innovation and like a Minister of Innovation. And that's not the only department that innovates, of course, like, but they do help to fund kind of like this, this question. They help to fund and explore different innovative methodologies. And then they help to make the case for what's working and what's not. Like they have this ROI, basically the innovation barometer, where they help teams understand what that innovation is doing for the public in Denmark, and to share that around Europe. So I think it's a really interesting idea. And I think what it probably provides most is that cover and that support really to be able to try new things when everybody's working in such a constrained and really mission-oriented organization.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have just a couple minutes left. I was wondering if either of you had any final thoughts, parting words, anything to leave us with after this session today?
Well, I always learn so much from, being on these panels. I love being able to share the VA sort of journey, the VA story. And Blair, it's been a pleasure to sort of co-panel with you. I always learn so much. And, it's just such an exciting time in government. And I will say that in terms of innovation and sort of thinking ahead of our next greatest generation of public servants, I think it's really going to serve as a key recruitment and retention tool. Innovation itself, and also in terms of the design thinking, I think it really helps us get back to basics as to why we are here in government, which is to put the people first at center. And I'm excited for this next generation of employees to be excited about joining federal government and making things better for the people. Over.
Yeah, same. I feel like Barbara's always got says it best. Totally. I do think similarly, what's excited me the most, and then since being outside, what I've been super having FOMO about is just the tremendous work around the people and citizens that's been happening, kind of that drive and movement and the communities that have just emerged and the connections between the two. And so I think just continue to encourage and support everybody in the government that is trying to innovate, do new things, or trying to shine a light on the things that are working really well. Because sometimes it's hard with everything else going on, and just really excited about what the next decade will bring with all of you there. So thank you so much for having me. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure, Barbara and GovLoop. Thanks all.
Awesome. Thank you both so much, Barbara and Blair, for joining us today. This has been really inspiring, really informative. It's awesome. I think GovLoop, we love to highlight, the cool and innovative things the government is doing. And it's just such a great opportunity to sit and chat with you and hear about how you are making a difference in your agencies and also for the lives of citizens out there. So thank you again for your time. We really appreciate it. Also want to say thank you to our sponsors for the summit today. The American School of Public Affairs, Blue Cross Blue Shield, GEHA, Gov White Papers, Red Hat, and Rubric, all of our NextGen alliance partners for this year. And so what's next? This session will be available on demand after, as well as the slides as usual. We will send you a link to the on-demand recording of this after the session in a couple days. You can also check the leaderboard to see where you are. There's a little bit of a delay, but again, the more actions you take and active you are, the higher you'll rank. If you do want your CPE credit for this session, reminder to just fill out the evaluation form. It's in the resource console here and also in the resource center in the main environment. And then feel free to reach out with us if you do have any questions. So we do have our lunch keynotes up next. So first up, we have Mary Abijay talking about your team hates you and why, and how you can fix it. I'm very interested to hear how that goes. And then learning about how to create a psychologically safe team. I think this is a great topic, great follow-up for what we've been talking about today. And then we also will be highlighting our NextGen Public Service Award winners. This is one of my favorite parts of the summit, always really inspiring. So I will see you in the keynote. And reminder, we have more sessions after that in our next breakout this afternoon. But thank you, Blair. Thank you, Barbara. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the summit.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.